Welcome to Microdose Psychedelic Insights, powered by the Conscious Fund. This is the Cognito series, casual psychedelic conversations on cognitive liberty.
Anthony, thank you for joining us for another episode of Incognito.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, man. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about the work you do at Ketamine Media?
Yeah. So my name's Anthony Chibani. I am a managing partner and the head of business development here at Ketamine Media. And Ketamine Media, we work with ketamine clinics, wellness centers that administer ketamine for the treatment of treatment-resistant conditions. And over the last couple of years, we've gone and worked with clinics in about 47 states now and in 3 countries. And so over the last couple of years, we've got to see a lot of great things. We've got to see a lot of lives changed. We work with a lot of great, medical professionals, and we really just we help them, help the patients, right? Making sure that they even know that this treatment's available, as so many don't know that it is available. So for us, it's really just, we came into this with a vision of one, just helping people, right? We wanted to help as many people as possible as we could. And as we got thrown into it, we've now had the ability to help a lot of providers just simply try to reach these patients and let them know that, there's finally a treatment that is really beneficial and can really, really help people get their lives back.
Fantastic, man. How long have you been doing that for?
So I got into Ketamine Media July of 2018 during my senior year at the University of Tennessee. And so I got to meet my great partners, Chris and Cassie. And, at the time they were looking for a third member to bring on the team to really kind of help them, fuel the growth of this. And so, ironically enough, we met over a LinkedIn DM, and, from there we just kind of started that relationship. And then, July came around and we really kind of went full speed ahead. And for the last, 2.5 years, it's just kind of been head down, full speed ahead, really just trying to build, not only our company, but this industry. We really feel like we've taken it upon ourselves, along with the rest of the companies around, like Microdose, for instance. But, we really feel like that since we do work with so many providers, the most, to my knowledge, as far as any other agency in the world, we really feel like it's our duty to kind of go ahead and build this up, right? So with that, we've tried to create some other properties. KetamineDirectory.com is a property that we own. Ketamine News is another website that we own. And so, any way that we can help, we just kind of want to thrust ourselves into it and just, bring as much awareness to this as possible, because the results really are just unbelievable.
Fantastic. I didn't know that the origin story of the business was a LinkedIn DM, and it's kind of funny because that's how Microdose started for me too.
That's wild. Yeah, it's shout out to LinkedIn, man. Yeah, who knows what I'd be doing without LinkedIn right now? So
well, sometimes all you need to do is ask, right?
Exactly. Just I was always taught, take action and figure it out from there. So that was exactly. And I think that's just really what our company is also built around, is we just want to take, imperfect action, right? We're not going to always have the perfect answer out of the gate. But one thing I think that we've shown is that we'll figure it out. If it's not perfect, we'll figure it out.
And we'll fix it if it's
exactly. Well, you're constantly fixing things in this industry. It's, when you're talking about ads, you're talking about, websites, you're talking about content, how patients are interacting with you and so forth. You're always just listening and trying to understand and see what's working. We don't claim to know everything, right? A lot of what we do is focused on, what the data says, what the patients say, really interacting with the community and not always thinking that you have it figured out, even when you've produced the results and you've shown that you do have a good understanding of it, but always just keeping an open mind and saying, hey, it could be different tomorrow. It could be different a week from now. So we've just got to constantly be listening and paying attention and just trying to reciprocate that to the consumers. So
yeah, definitely. And being the dumbest person in the room is sometimes a good thing, because
it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's my official title at Microdose. Dumb person in the room.
Yeah, give yourself some credit.
Yeah. Anyways, so I have a question that I'm supposed to, not much for formalities or structure generally. I don't introduce the podcast properly. I forget the questions sometimes. One of the questions I want to ask at every podcast is, what is your favorite psychedelic? So I feel like the answer might be obvious. It might be ketamine, but is there, for you personally or professionally, what's your favorite?
Yeah, I think for me, the best experience I had, and I've only done it once, was psilocybin, actually. There was something about it that, that when I did it, it just gave me a very, very good clarity. It wasn't something that was necessarily too deep, right? I didn't go off on this mystical journey or anything like that, right? It was something that was very, very beneficial to me in the sense that it just kind of gave me this calming understanding of what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah. And, obviously once I kind of started getting into the ketamine space, growing up, I was always an athlete. So I played baseball in college, and, I never really experimented with anything while I was playing, just because that was just kind of focused on that. But once I got out of it and started getting into ketamine, into the psychedelic space, right. I just felt like I needed to go down this hole. I needed to kind of experience what I'm advocating to others. Right. So for me, I experimented with it, and it was awesome. I mean, just the clarity, I keep saying that word, but that's just truly what I felt, was just everything that I'd kind of been trying to piece together and figure out at the, young age of 22, 23, where so much change is happening, embarking on a new journey of starting a company and so forth. At that point, that really just kind of put everything together, and it made me feel a lot better about going out and advocating for psychedelics and so forth. So, that was, that was a wonderful experience for me, and it was very, very insightful. And, at the time I was also going back and looking at my childhood, right? I think a lot of us do that as we get older. You start to kind of really go back and understand, what made you into who you are today. And I think a big thing is also just, being self-aware. And I think that's a big thing that psychedelics do in general, is they help you be incredibly more self-aware about yourself. And not only about yourself, but also the individuals around you. And so for me, I really wanted to understand who I was, because for the longest time I was a baseball player, right? That is who I was to everyone that knew me, to my friends, to my family. And so I wasn't that anymore. Right. So I was figuring out who I am now and trying to shape myself into who I want to be 5-10 years from now. Right. And I think that's so important for all of us, is to, be happy with who you are, but don't necessarily be satisfied with who you are. Understand that it's a part of the journey, and from the standpoint that you're going to go through different levels of life, right? You're going to evolve. You're going to be constantly changing. And so with me, I always try to keep it at the forefront of who I'm aspiring to be, from the standpoint of, when I have kids, right? The one day that I do have kids, I want them to be able to look at their dad and say, that's my dad. Right. Today they're going to know exactly yeah, that's my dad. They're going to know exactly who he is. And that's, I want them to also know that I wasn't always that person, right? I'm not who I am today. I'm much different than I was 3 years ago. And so for me, it's just always keeping that at the forefront. And I think it's the same in business, right? Everyone has their companies, and you see this big picture of what you think your company should be, or what you hope for it to be. And I just think that you have to keep it at the forefront so that you can make decisions. You can also work on aspects of yourself and your company that maybe aren't as strong as you wish they would be. And so I think tying this back all in, just kind of with psychedelics in general, is just overall self-awareness in the modern day, I think, is just incredibly important. And sometimes we're not as self-aware due to, for instance, like social media, right? It's just it's a platform in which a lot of individuals, and I think just a lot of people in general, look at, and they become more aware about other people than they do about themselves.
Yeah. And I would say, I love that you said that, because, in this, we're in this day and age where everything's instantly available. You know, the ultimates of life, the ultimate successes, all the tops are always advertised, always, you know, but people's realities are they never really seem to match up with that. And so like a lot of this unhappiness, and I think that, you know, the mental health epidemic is, you know, first of all cultural, second of all diet. You know, food is just different these days, right? And then third, I think it's kind of a combination of this, where culture now is almost teaching you to look outside of yourself for what you know, should want or need. We were talking to Anders Beatty recently in production for the World on Drugs documentary, and he said, you know, a lot of this deep-rooted unhappiness and guilt and shame is coming from people not living up to other people's expectations of who they are. You know, go to the certain school, get a certain job, get a wife, a dog, a house. You know, these are the things you're supposed to get to make you happy and to be you. But it's actually quite the opposite, right? You're living up to somebody else's expectations when you do that. And so I think, you know, the real power of psychedelics beyond maybe their medical efficacy is they kind of help you remove those barriers of who other people are expecting you to be, and then you get to listen to yourself. Truly.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And you know, that was the biggest thing for me was, as an athlete, right? I always had people telling me that this is who I was, or, you know, like, you got to go and, you know, you got to be a professional baseball player. You got to go and do this and whatever it may be. And I learned that once I stopped playing, I had so many more interests in life that I had never been aware of before, because I was so focused on this one specific task at hand. And I think that's kind of something that psychedelics can do for people, is the fact that it's just going to open your mind to a plethora of ideas and thoughts that you just might not have been able to get to, because over time you've just kind of been programmed subconsciously to think a certain way, or to think that certain things determine who you are or what you're supposed to do. And so for me, and, you know, that's kind of where I kind of feel like I really want to take this space, is to be able to connect psychedelic medicine with culture. Yeah. You know, having the unique advantage of being young in this space and being 25, I think I can relate to a lot of millennials and a lot of Gen Z. You know, I was born in 94, and I believe the cutoff for millennials is 95. So, you know, I'm very close to Gen Z, aside from just millennials, and to where I hope that I can be, you know, a voice in this space to be able to really advocate for them as well. Simply because when you're dealing with ketamine right now, right, there's obviously a cost that goes into it right now, with it not necessarily being covered by insurance. There's obviously Spravato, the nasal form, which is covered by insurance, but it has been shown to not be as effective as IV has. So, you know, that's not really the generation that's going to be doing this right now. At least on the bulk side of it, right? It's going to be a higher end, or a older generation. And so for me, I think the future is, you know, I heard Rick Dublin say from MAPS, they anticipate there, I believe, being 6,000 clinics administering psychedelics by 2030. And so my thought is, over the next, 10 years, this next decade, is to really be advocating towards that younger demographic, because they're ultimately going to be the ones that are doing this on a mainstream fashion. I believe, I think that's where we're headed. And I also think that mental health just has been shown, millennials and Gen Z, it's just much higher in those generations. And I think it's going to continue to be, right? We grew up with social media. We grew up with the phone. We grew up with a ton of information, which sometimes can be overwhelming. Yeah. And so I think that's where it's headed. Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of is a nice segue. I try and do 10 minutes on psychedelics, 10 minutes on sustainability, and 10 minutes on the art of being incognito. So we're a little bit over, but that kind of ties into the sustainability aspect of all of this. So, I just kind of leave it as a broad question. When I say the word sustainability, what comes to mind, for you right now, either related to the space or otherwise?
Yeah, sustainability to me, I think what's going on in the space right now, and I think what's needed the most, is really just overall understanding of like protocols and kind of regulations, right? And I think that's why you've seen a lot of organizations like ASKP. I know that, you know, you guys started that or were a part of starting that, the new organization, the Psychedelic Medicine Association. And I think having organizations like that to kind of help provide sustainable protocols, sustainable, you know, just overall like rules of what this treatment is going to be and what these new treatments that are coming are going to be like. I think that's, to me, when I think of sustainability, that's kind of at the front of my mind right now, just because I'm in it every day, right? I'm having conversations with providers all the time about, you know, how are you going about handling your clinic, right? How are you going about setting up your clinic? What's it look like when they come into your clinic? What's it look like when they leave your clinic? Having all of those types of conversations and really getting as much insight as possible into how these clinics are operating, but, you know, not only one or two, but how 100 of them are operating, right? So at that point, I can understand what is going on behind the scenes. So when I'm going in and I'm, you know, advertising, or I'm trying to raise awareness to these patients to let them know about this treatment, I can provide them with the best information. Having the ability to talk with so many different groups and so many different individuals that are on the front lines kind of gives me the ability to go back and gives our agency the ability to go back and really say, okay, this is obviously what's working, right? Because we have a big data set. So we're able to say, this is working the most, this isn't. And so for me, when I think about sustainability, it's really just putting all of that together and shaping the future. Shaping the future to where these treatments can be sustainable, to where patients continuously show that they're getting better. That's overall the most important thing for us, is patient care first, right? We want to make sure that patients, when using psychedelics in the correct setting, are getting the best results possible. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing that just yet, right? I mean, this is still a very, very new industry. We're figuring out a lot. We're learning a lot. And so I think with all of that being said, taking all of it in, taking all of the information in, and just, you know, putting great minds together to try to figure out how we can make this the best and how we can sustain that moving forward and continue to build on it.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes sense. And so using, you know, I guess a pretty direct parallel to our working relationship would be the ketamine conference, where, you know, there's a bunch of people partnering up on that. You know, you guys were helping out, Bexon was helping out, everyone really, you know, pulled together and contributed to make that a success. So, you know, in my eyes, when we're talking about the business side of things, like, there's a sustainable practice, right? You know, it's a profitable event where everybody sort of gets a stage, you know, they get to share their top line information and, you know, build a high quality information database that other people can access. And, you know, if that helps impact in a positive direction a couple, you know, clinics or practitioners that wouldn't have had, you know, that kind of insight and access anyways, like, that, to me, that's a success. So, you know, small base hit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I love what you guys are doing with all of that, right? Getting all of these great minds and companies that are really on the forefront, pioneering this space, because that's really what all of us are doing, is really pioneering the psychedelic industry for, you know, for the use of treatment-resistant conditions and so forth. So I think with all of that, those are really good for the people internally within the space. And so I think kind of what's next is really going to be the patients, right? And just the general public, and getting them that information, one, in a way that's actually understandable to them. If you're not in this space and you're not doing this all the time, it's sometimes you're really not going to understand some of the ins and outs, right? Like, just from being in it day to day. And so for us, a big thing is we need to be able to reciprocate this top of the line information in a way that's understandable to the general public, right? Kind of tying culture back into it. And so I think that's what the next, you know, 2, 3, 4 years is really going to be big on, as we kind of get to a place where this really just blows out and becomes mainstream, and everyone really sees the benefits of this, and just how much better it is than taking, you know, a prescription medicine, like, for instance, like Zoloft or something along those lines. And so, you know, because we've seen what it's done to patients. I've seen the transformational stories. I've heard them. I've got to record them, right, when we're doing testimonials, and it's just so touching. I tell this one story often, because it's really kind of my biggest motivator in the space. I would say I sat down with a patient, and we were doing a testimonial for them, and I had just asked them to kind of share their story. And she said she was a day away from committing suicide. And she saw this Facebook ad, and she didn't know at the time I had actually been the one that created that Facebook ad. So I'm sitting there listening to this, and she's saying, if I didn't see this ad, I was planning on going through with it. Wow. And that was just something that when you see someone say that to you, like, it's one thing to hear it, but when you can see it in their eyes, you get chills. And it's something that I think about every day, honestly, right? Like those days where you're working till 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, you're back in the office at 7, 8, 9, and you're tired, right? Like we're all human, we get tired. But anytime I just kind of go to that place, that's the first thought that comes to my mind is push through it, because you have the opportunity to potentially save someone's life, and every life is just as important as another. And so for me, that's something I keep at the forefront, and it's been awesome. It really is. And I can't wait to continue to do this one, but also just to kind of get more people into it, right? Like there's so many more people that have no idea that ketamine's even an option. It's unbelievable to me.
Now, so there's a real energy in the industry about this. We are doing important work. This work does have the potential to save lives. But then, really quickly on the other side, just making sure you always kind of measure the risk, reward, benefit, and all that, right? None of these treatments are perfect. There are, side effects, there are dangers, there are downsides. So how do you, like, as somebody that markets these things, and that's your job, is to really generally like increase the amount of people aware of this, using these products and all that. How do you balance that with making sure that, you're keeping safety in mind, you're not pushing something on somebody where it's like,
right.
entering that kind of potentially unethical or unbalanced.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for us, a lot of it's keywords, right? Like, don't say cure, say treatment. Also educating individuals and letting them know that, hey, this does not work for everyone. It does not, right? Some people are not going to be able to do this treatment. It's just not going to be best for you. And there have been, negative events that have happened, through this, not necessarily saying that it was ketamine related. It's obviously mental health related, but, you get into those positions where
states,
right. Exactly. And so, it's one of those things where we have to make sure that we're not only trying to spread awareness of this, but we're also educating, right? It's twofold when it comes to, we call it marketing, call it advertising, call it whatever you want. I like to call it raising awareness. And for us, it's not only doing that, but also educating these individuals, because we want them to know what's going on. We want them to know every piece of information that's valuable to them in this, so that they and their medical provider can make an educated decision on whether this is going to be best for them or not. So we never claim to say, hey, this is 100% going to work. All we try to say is it works better than most other types of treatments for mental health and chronic pain, right? So,
but it's not a come one, come all, come get your
yeah, absolutely not.
And Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely not. We can't, we definitely don't want to do that. We're super focused on simply just trying to get people the right information and let them know that it's available. And a lot of that's also focused on individuals that, don't even know about it. Different strategies that we implement to make sure that we're not only reaching them, but we're reaching individuals that haven't even heard about ketamine, or they've only heard about the horse tranquilizer or Special K, right? So there's a lot of stigma already surrounding it. And so it obviously makes our jobs a little bit more difficult, because we're having to break down these barriers, right? So,
well, I mean, even as me, like a person in the industry, like I think I tried ketamine 6 months ago in a recreational state, and I was like, wait, what? Horse tranquilizer? Are you fucking serious? Like,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
What's going on? And then we threw a ketamine conference, and I got to learn about it, and I was like, okay, wow, yeah, there's the education barrier.
Yeah. So it's super important. And I think education, knowledge is power, right? It truly is. And so as long as we can give people enough education in this space, and then also adding the creative piece to it that actually makes them interested in it, right? Because you see so much content in the world these days. If your creative isn't good and it doesn't suck someone in to want to actually look at it, they're gone. They're scrolling. And so we just have to find the right balance of creative plus education. And then when you put that together, that's really when you see these clinics take off and they really start to see patients coming to these clinics. And thirdly, what I will say to that is one of the most important things that we've seen in this space is the people that are on the front lines. EQ over IQs, right? From the standpoint of you've got to be able to connect with these individuals, right? With the patients, because, you know, when you have mental health, you have anxiety, and I've dealt with anxiety before. I've had friends that have dealt with depression. And so I've seen it firsthand. And when you're dealing, like, you're not yourself all the time, right? Like sometimes you're gonna be a little bit more triggered. You might come off a little bit more aggressive. You might say things you don't necessarily mean. And so it's a big deal to understand that when you're on the front lines of this and you're dealing directly with the patients, that's got to be at the forefront of your thoughts, especially as a provider or a counselor or a psychotherapist, right? You've just got to understand that being able to connect with them, where they can come into your office, they can come to your clinic, and they can cry if they need to cry, right? They can shed those emotions because they just feel so alone. And so I think that's the other side of this. That's almost kind of like that special talent piece. Like, right, it can be taught, but that's definitely a skill. That's a talent. That's, for sure. You know, so there's people that are they just have that. And those are the clinics that I've seen that have really separated themselves and that have really built, you know, thriving businesses, but are also helping a ton of people. So
safe spaces.
Absolutely.
I feel like I could go for a real solid cry in a room with you. Don't worry about that.
I hope so.
So on topic number 3 here, we got, you know, the title of the podcast, Incognito, and most people think about the, you know, hidden browser definition of that word, but
Yeah.
In definition, it's the philosophical principle that one's existence is demonstrated by the fact that one thinks, or the intellectual process of the self or the ego. So, you know, bearing in mind those definitions, basically just knowing thyself, how do you, you know, practice the art of being incognito in everyday situations?
Yeah. And I'm still learning. I'll be the first one to say I am still learning that. I go back and forth all the time, to be quite frank with you, right? Sometimes I'm like, you need to turn down the ego. And for the longest time, I was always a very out there, outspoken individual, right? Playing sports, you know, just being competitive, whether it was in high school, whatever it is. I was just always kind of I was in the crowd, right? I was out there, I was having a good time. People, you knew if I was in the room, you're probably going to hear me. So, you know, as I've gotten older, obviously I've become much more internal with my thoughts, moving a little bit slower, being more patient, trying to understand and think things out before just coming out and saying them, right? And so dealing with the ego for the longest time, I was a kid growing up that was told to turn it down. And that's what everyone was always trying to tell me was turn it down, turn it down, turn it down. As I've gotten older, what I've actually come to learn is I don't necessarily think always turning it down is the best thing to do, because I think it's what makes, you know, the greats, right? It's what makes the greats great, is having the ability to tap into that ego when need be. But I think part of maturing, and as I've gotten older, what I've learned is being able to control it is really the key.
Yeah.
So understand
the source of power, not letting it control you.
Exactly. Right. So like growing up, for instance, like I refer this to this example I'm about to share with you. So growing up, I was ADD. So I was, you know, they put me on, you know, Vyvanse, tried Adderall, tried all of those things. And it didn't really do a lot, right? It was more so just kind of felt like it put me in a shell. It wasn't something where I felt like I was still myself. So as I've gotten older now, I've, you know, through meditation, through yoga, I've really kind of dove into all of that and just trying to really harness the ability to control the mind. It is a muscle, right? So as you train it, it gets better and it gets stronger. And that's how I've really tried to focus on it. And so just progressing through, watching people that I feel like are great at what they do or have reached heights that I would like to reach one day. I've really heard a consistency from them in the standpoint of you've got to be able to control it. You've got to control the ego, but you can't view it as a negative. You've got to view the ego as a positive. And so now it's really, you know, what I'm super focused on is just simply catching those moments where I feel like it's starting to kind of creep up and maybe not be in control, and just to consistently remind myself, okay, hey, go back here, control it. And also understanding when to use it, because you don't need to use it all the time, because it's just that's not going to be the best way to go about getting things done.
Yeah.
So I think it ties all back to being self-aware, right? Being self-aware ultimately to me is the key to a lot of this. And I think that's what we've seen with ketamine, is that a lot of times the patients come in and sometimes they struggle with that ability of always necessarily being super self-aware, right? They're kind of justifying things from outside sources. And so I think ketamine and psychedelics in general kind of give you that opportunity to now go back inside and really look inside, to where now you've kind of taken back control, right, of yourself. So
A bit of a shower for the ego.
exactly. You got to control it. It can be your best friend. It can be your worst enemy. So you just got to understand how to keep it in that balance and keep it under control. And once you figure that out, life really just gets a lot better, as I've learned. And this is all talking from experience, right? I don't claim that there's only one way of doing things, right? Or this is the only way. This is just my personal experience and my personal story. So,
well, and that's the thing, is that everyone, I feel like our world is going into a space of absolutism now, where it's like, no, I'm right.
Right. And that's, clearly, I think we can blame Google for that one.
Yeah. But everything's right there. Number one, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a Shakespeare quote that I kind of like. It's like, 'tis neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so, right? Things are just things, events are just events, but then you charge it with emotion and thought and feeling. And, there are some inherently bad things, but for the most part, you kind of create that reality in your head.
Yeah, there's actually a great saying, create your own reality, right? I actually had a friend that got a tattoo that said create your own reality. It was like the two little little kind of like house rooftops type looking things. But I love that saying personally, because I truly believe that you have the ability to, one, manifest the things that you really believe in. I truly believe in that. I think if you really put it out there into the world and you focus and you work at it.
Yeah, and it works for negative thoughts too.
As well, right? If you're, the law of attraction, right? So that was one thing when I was kind of going through that transitional phase. I watched that movie, The Secret. I was listening to, a lot of my favorite athletes or a lot of my favorite entrepreneurs would always reference the law of attraction. And so I was diving into it, trying to really understand it. And that's what it is.
If you want
You've got to be able to visualize the things that you want, and not only the things, but yourself. You got to visualize how you want yourself to be, and doing that and practicing it, just like your brain. It's a muscle.
Greats are the greats, because they have that clear definition of this is where I'm going and nothing will stop.
Right. It's really just a clear vision, and when you have it, you can't be stopped, because when you create it your own internally, nothing on the outside affects that. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
When it comes from an outside sources, you now have the ability to let outside sources dictate your happiness, right? I hear it all the time. Don't get too high on the claps and don't get too low on the booze. You've got to stay in the middle, because if you get too high or you get too low, that means that you're letting everyone else dictate your outcome. And the truth is, you dictate your outcome, no one else.
I love that. At first I heard booze and I was like, that kind of makes sense. And I was like, oh, boo. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, booze.
I like that one. Cool, man. Well, we're running into the half an hour mark. It's been a great conversation. We always have good flow when we're chatting. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
If anyone's trying to reach you online and learn more about what you do, get in touch, where would you direct them?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check out our website, ketaminemedia.com. Feel free to shoot me an email as well. That's anthony@ketaminemedia.com. And we're always open to talk, always open for conversations, even if it has nothing to do with, advertising, marketing, awareness. Always happy to talk with individuals in the space, or just anyone that has a question whatsoever. Love having conversations with everyone and getting to learn about you guys. So we're here for the long run, and excited to see how this space continues to shape out over the next few years.
Likewise, man. I look forward to working with you towards that.
Absolutely, Patrick. Yeah, absolutely. And we will. But yeah, thanks again, Patrick. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, man.
Take care, boss.
All right. See you, man.
Thanks for joining the Incognito series, brought to you by Microdose and the Conscious Fund. Visit our website at www.microdose.buzz.